Welcome back to another rendition of the NFL Weekly Injury Report. We are heading into Week 15. We're buckling up for the end of the season. It is getting cold. It's cold in here, but we still have games to watch. We still have fantasy championships to win. So long as that is occurring, here we are. So let's get right into it. Some big names on the injury report this week. Thankfully, shouldn't be anything too major, but CeeDee Lamb has popped up on the injury report again for the Dallas Cowboys with a shoulder injury, likely to be that AC joint sprain that he suffered a couple of weeks ago. He's been playing. He didn't leave the game this past week, so I would expect for him to play this week. Being that lone bright spot on the Dallas Cowboys offense, he should get a ton of targets and volume this week, even when Cooper Rush is playing, just like he would when Dak is. So make sure you start him this week. Alvin Kamara has been awesome for my fantasy team personally, but if you're playing against him, not so much. Regardless, he popped up with an illness. It's unclear how that's going to affect him moving forward, whether his status for this week is up in the air or if he'll be fine and move past it. Regardless, pay attention to what they're going to say, especially in regards to volume. He's likely to play regardless, but they might back off on his volume if he is not feeling well still. Mike Evans is still dealing with a hamstring injury. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, but that was the same pattern that he had last week, and he still ended up playing, so I expect him to play this week as well, unless there is an unexpected issue that occurs and he has a little bit of a setback there. Joe Burrow ended up on the injury report as well with a knee and wrist injury. Zach Taylor, the head coach for the Bengals, said that it's unlikely to be anything too serious and he's not expected to miss any time. That's right, I have my ins. I know Zach Taylor. I do not. Breece Hall, the running back for the New York Jets, missed last week's game. Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis took the majority of the touches. I think they split it almost perfectly even, actually. But Hall is still struggling with his knee injury. I would actually expect him to be shut down for the rest of the year. Do I think the Jets will do it? Probably not, because they're the Jets, but make sure you keep an eye on him. Even if he does play, I would expect for him to have a much smaller volume of touches than what he would normally have, and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis will still be heavily involved. Both of them played pretty well. I would like to see Allen get a couple more touches, especially down at the goal line, but either one is a valid start. It's going to be kind of hit or miss as far as which one scores, if one of them scores. Make sure you pay attention to Hall moving forward to figure out a direction there. Justin Herbert, quarterback for the Chargers, of course. He is dealing with a different left ankle injury, supposedly, as than what he had earlier this season with that left high ankle sprain. And he's also dealing with a thigh injury, which I believe is a contusion. He left last week's game and then came back in, finished it out. Even if he's not 100%, I would not expect him to miss the game this week. So expect him to play, expect him to go. May not be the highest fantasy point generator this year for quarterbacks, but he's consistent, and that Chargers offense will put up some points at least. So make sure if you have him, keep an eye on him, but I expect him to play. Alrighty, now for our deep dive this week, there hasn't been an immediate injury, at least not super recently, within the last month or two, for this injury. But today we're going to be diving into a biceps rupture or tear of the tendon, whether it's proximal up closer to the shoulder or distal. Now, two people in the NFL that have suffered this injury this year are Austin Corbett, the center for the Carolina Panthers. I believe he also plays guard. And then Matt Milano, the linebacker for the Bills. Milano suffered his in late August, and Corbett suffered his towards the beginning of the season, I believe, in early October. So when we dive into the bicep as a whole, what I kind of already mentioned is you can have a proximal tear or a distal tear. So proximal and distal is just in relation to the center of your body. And so when you are moving up closer towards the center of your body, you're moving more proximal. So down to the elbow, you're going to be a little bit more distal. The biceps has two different origin sites, one being up into the shoulder with the long head of the biceps, and the other one being the short head of the biceps, attaching closer into the inside of your chest onto a process called the coracoid process. Distally, you can follow that muscle all the way down, and it's attaching right by this elbow here. So what the bicep does, right, is depending on the head and the origin and then the attachment of the biceps, it can do a couple of different things. The long head of the bicep helps to abduct, bring this arm out and internally rotate. The short head will help to adduct to bring this arm in. Both the short head and the long head both will help to do shoulder flexion. And then down at the elbow, it flexes the elbow and supinates. And that biceps is actually the main supinator of your forearm, even though we do have a muscle called the supinator. But regardless, a proximal tear up closer towards the shoulder is much more common overall. This is seen typically in patients around the age of 60 or higher. And what ends up happening is that long head, more often than not, is the one that tears and ruptures, and you get what we call a Popeye's deformity, where I grew up on these cartoons, but if you haven't seen it, Popeye is a sailor man who likes to eat spinach, and whenever he eats spinach, he gets stronger and he gets these muscles that look like little balls that stack on top of each other. So what happens is when this long head of the bicep ruptures, you get this little ball in this bicep because that muscle is no longer attached. So it retracts and centers here in the middle. Very rarely, if ever, will you hear or see a short head of the biceps tear. It's very, very uncommon. Like I said, it's more common that it's the long head. Conversely, the second most common one before the short head of the bicep injury to occur to the biceps is the distal rupture. Now, this is commonly seen in people around the ages of 25 to 40, 30 to 40 that are active, playing in a sport, and are lifting heavy objects or weights. Because of the fact that we're talking about the NFL and sports, we're going to see that distal rupture a little bit more commonly, even though it is less common overall as far as looking at injuries to the bicep. That's what we're going to focus on. So when you have a distal rupture of this bicep, you're going to have surgical interventions, right? You're going to have to take that tendon and muscle and reattach it to the the insertion site onto that radial head, which is your radius is one of the bones in your forearm. You really should have the surgery within 2 to 6 weeks due to the fact that if you delay and wait, what can happen is you could have really deep scarring, which will end up making it difficult, nearly impossible to reattach the tendon to the bone. So you're not only going to likely have a longer and more difficult recovery, but it's possible that the surgery isn't even able to occur. So once you have surgery, it's very, very similar to the rehab following a triceps injury, just opposite side of the arm and slightly different motion. So you're going to be in a cast initially, and you're going to then be in that for about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the protocol. And then you're going to come out of it and you're going to be in a locked brace. Over time, that brace will start to increase as far as the range of motion that you're in, working towards full extension. Now, the difference between the biceps and the tricep, besides the location of the muscle itself and the actions that it does, is that supination piece. So initially, once you come out of the cast and put into the locked brace, you're going to be at this 90 degrees with a neutral forearm, because the most stressful position that you can put this muscle in that tendon in while it's healing, is going to be this full extension with supination, and you're trying to then activate that bicep. So that's where we're going to keep it here, where you're taking stress off the bicep, giving it some slack because your elbow is in flexion and your forearm is in neutral rather than in supination or pronation. Once you have surgery, you're in the brace, you just got out of the cast, you're going to work towards passive range of motion, working towards full extension and supination, eventually adding in active assisted range of motion, active range of motion, and then ultimately isometrics and lifting. That most difficult position, like I said, is going to be when you start to use this bicep and you're trying to avoid placing too much strain on that tendon as the graft heals to the bone. But typically for full recovery, you're looking at somewhere around 4 to 6 months before you have full function again. For sport-specific injuries and return to sport, it's going to take a little bit longer because you add on this extra stage of trying to perform sport-specific activities and stress that muscle, tendon, and joints in this case as the bicep crosses both the shoulder and the elbow in a very specific way to make sure that can hold up not only in a short burst of moment for the sport, but also prolonged over time over the course of a game, a practice, and so on, and a season overall. That is a little bit of a deeper dive into a biceps rupture. Like I said, there hasn't been one recently, like within the last month or two for the NFL, thankfully, but Matt Milano and Austin Corbett did suffer prior in the season. So in regards to over time having impact, because both of these players, even though Austin Corbett is on the offense, as an offensive lineman, he doesn't score points in fantasy, neither does Milano on defense unless it's an interception or otherwise. With a biceps rupture repair, usually, especially in football, there aren't any limiting factors. When you get into more of like a throwing motion, pitching, things of that nature, you may have a little bit more difficulty getting back to 100% simply because of the stress and the forces that are placed on the elbow and the shoulder when doing so. But there's no reason why you cannot come back from this type of injury and be 100%, if not very, very close to it. As always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you click that bell, subscribe, comment down below, let me know what you liked, what you thought, and if you have any suggestions or other curiosities that you'd like to have answered moving forward. Best of luck this week as we get into the playoffs. My league has one more week before we get there. I'm trying to hold on for the last little remainder so I can get another bye. But best of luck to everyone who's playing fantasy. Best of luck to your favorite teams. The Jets are over. I mean, they were before, but if you're looking for a waiver wire stream this week, the only player I have full confidence in on the Jets is the punter. A close second would be the kicker. He's actually doing pretty well. Everyone else, find a different player. Even though we're playing the Jaguars. Maybe, actually, start the Jaguars players. The Jets defense is horrible. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.